On the 21st day of 2022, Vladimir Putin sent his so-called peacekeeping troops into eastern Ukraine after recognizing the independence of Luhansk and Donetsk. Everyone thought Putin will stop there, but everyone was wrong. 3 days later, there were missile strikes in Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine.
Resist. Oh, I tell you what, I just heard a big bang right here behind me. There are big explosions taking place in Kyiv right now.
Soon there were missile attacks on Ukraine's military installations and air defense systems all over the country. After Ukraine's air defense systems were disabled, Russian helicopters, tanks and armored vehicles rumbled in from north, south and east. I always thought full-scale wars were a thing of the past. I too was mistaken. Until the very last moment, observers of international relations were skeptical about invasion of Ukraine. It just did not make sense. Why would Russia go to war knowing very well that the global sanctions that would follow will suffocate it both economically and diplomatically? In this vlog, I will try to understand everything that has happened so far in Ukraine, so stick till the end. The only people who were sure that Russia will attack Ukraine were the fellows at the Central Intelligence Agency. I'm sure CIA must have its sources inside Russian government to warn them about a possible attack. Still, it would be interesting to understand how the agency could have predicted the attack on Ukraine without any insider information. One thing that is an absolute fact is that Russia just cannot let Ukraine go under Western influence. Why, I will talk about it in the next part of the video. Meanwhile, in November last year, when Russian troops started piling on the Ukrainian border, the director of CIA, William Burns, traveled to Moscow in order to discourage a possible attack and to get some more information on what Putin is planning. Obviously, the Russians would not have revealed their grand plan to the chief spy of their archenemy. So on 15th of November, in a press conference by NATO, Americans publicly indicated a potential attack on Ukraine.
We have just discussed the security situation in and around Ukraine. In recent weeks, we have seen large and unusual concentrations of Russian forces close to Ukraine's borders.
And warned Russia against any further provocation or aggressive actions, hoping that Russia would back down after her plans were revealed. However, when after more than a month, Russian troops did not return from border, the CIA must have confirmed that Russia will attack Ukraine. Here's how. As I said before, Russia just cannot let Ukraine come under Western influence. At the same time, a military threat from Russia will definitely make Ukraine urgently think about its security, especially after what happened in 2014. As a result, forcing Ukraine to get into an alliance with the West, either overtly by joining NATO or covertly by getting into a secret alliance. Once Putin made a threat, he had no choice but to invade Ukraine completely, otherwise risk losing it entirely. The CIA must have deduced this, and gradual build-up of troops on the Ukrainian border would have further confirmed an attack. Once an attack on Ukraine was confirmed, it would have been elementary to deduce the timing of the attack as well. That is sometime after the Winter Olympics in Beijing.
But how do you know about them? Elementary, my dear Watson.
See, Olympics is a big deal in China. It is a display of their national prestige, and Russians wouldn't have wanted to upset the only country that would support them after the attack. In 2014 too, Russia took over Crimea only after the conclusion of Winter Olympics in Sochi. Now as the invasion of Ukraine is underway, it would be important to understand why is Vladimir Putin doing what he is doing. Despite overwhelming odds, the people of Ukraine have decided to stay put and fight. A squad of 10 Ukrainian soldiers was seen attacking a Russian convoy in Kyiv. Forcing the convoy to abandon their vehicles and retreat. Civilians are arming themselves with AK-47s and Molotov cocktails. A couple couple of them were seen throwing a Molotov cocktail on a Russian tank from inside a car. In another clip, some Ukrainians were seen standing in front of Russian T-90s to stop them from moving forward. And one farmer even stole a Russian armored vehicle. The people of Ukraine are an inspiration to all, and their president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, has won hearts all over the world. Instead of running away, like many leaders do in these kinds of situations, Zelenskyy has decided to stay in Ukraine and fight with his men.
Лідер фракції тут, голова Офісу президента тут, прем'єр-міністр Шмигаль тут, Подоляк тут, президент тут. Всі ми тут, наші військові тут, громадяни суспільства тут, всі ми тут. Захищаємо нашу незалежність, нашу державу. І так буде й далі. Слава нашим захисникам, слава нашим захисницям. Слава Україні! Всім доброго ранку, українці. Зараз в мережі дуже багато з'явилось фейкової інформації, що, немов я закликаю складати зброю нашу армію і йде евакуація. Значить так, я тут, ніяку зброю ми не складемо, будемо захищати нашу державу, тому що наша зброя – це наша правда. Наша правда в тому, що це наша земля, наша країна, наші діти, і ми все це будемо захищати.
Observers of international relations often fall into the trap of cost and benefit analysis while trying to figure out whether a country will go to war or not. I fell into this exact trap in my last video. Therefore, for an accurate analysis, it is important to look at the emotions and ambitions of a country's leader, along with the costs a country will have to suffer for achieving her leader's ambitions. Eugene Rumor, along with Andrew Weiss and later Johnny Harris, were among the first since November to indicate that Putin's decision on Ukraine is an emotional one. The dissolution of Soviet Union in 1991 came as a huge shock to Vladimir Putin, who was a young spy in the KGB, the then Russia's intelligence service. And Putin blames Lenin for it. He believes that it was stupid of Lenin to give Soviet federal states the right to secede from the Union. Something I totally agree with. It just does not make sense for a country as diverse as the Soviet Union to give its federal states right to break away. It is obvious that once Soviet Union's power would have declined, the states would have broken up. Coming back, among all of the former Soviet states, the breakup from Ukraine hurt Putin the most. Ukraine was a jewel in the crown of Soviet Union. Apart from being the most resource-rich and industrious areas, Ukraine is also the birthplace of the Russian civilization. The
Rus.
Vikings expanded from here and established the Russian Empire. Russia, get it? Anyway, Ukraine has a special place in Putin's heart, and he has expressed it on many occasions, including in the speech he gave before recognizing the independence of Donetsk and Luhansk.
Once again, I would like to underscore that Ukraine is not just a neighboring country to us. It is an inherent part of our own history, culture, spiritual space.
Whatever happens, Putin cannot let Ukraine go into the NATO camp, like many other former Soviet states like Romania and Lithuania. And to be honest, which country would let an enemy state take over its neighbor? It would be a massive security threat. This is why since Putin became the president, he has been personally invested in Ukraine, making sure that the government there is always under Russian influence. In the 2004 Ukrainian elections, Kremlin went as far as to poison the pro-West candidate, Viktor Yushchenko.
Doctors confirmed that opposition candidate Viktor Yushchenko was poisoned during the campaign.
To make sure that their man, Viktor Yanukovych, became the president.
The healthy, vibrant opposition candidate for Ukraine's presidency transformed in a matter of a few weeks this fall into a gravely ill man. His face almost overnight changed into a scarred, bloated mask.
But before Putin's man could claim victory, a massive protest against corruption and election fraud erupted in Ukraine, called the Orange Revolution.
If they shoot us, if they send tanks, no matter what, there's nothing that can
overpower the will of the people.
Following which Viktor Yushchenko became the president. Although after 6 years, Putin's candidate Viktor Yanukovych did manage to become the president, but he too started leaning towards Europe after he assumed office. In 2014, another massive anti-corruption protest called the Dignity Revolution rocked Ukraine, after which Yanukovych had to flee to Russia, and in his place, another West-leaning leader, Petro Poroshenko, became the president. I personally feel that it was during this time Putin must have realized that the culture of Ukraine has changed, and people there now want a lush European life that their Western neighbors enjoy. And to stop that, Putin needed to do something more than just propaganda and regime changes. An invasion, perhaps. The West's response to Russian aggression was predictable. Sanctions. USA, England and the European Union states have frozen the assets of Russian central bank, and Russian oligarchs have been denied access to trade in Western markets. Major Russian banks have also been cut off from global payment system called SWIFT.
As Russian forces unleash their assault on Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities, we are resolved to continue imposing massive costs on Russia. Costs that will further isolate Russia from the international financial system and our economies. The European Union and its partners are working to cripple Putin's ability to finance his war machine. I will now propose to EU leaders the following measures. First, we commit to ensuring that a certain number of Russian banks are removed from SWIFT. This will ensure that these banks are disconnected from the international financial system and harm their ability to operate globally. SWIFT is the world's dominant global interbank payment system. Cutting banks off will stop them from conducting most of their financial transactions worldwide and effectively block Russian exports and imports.
Sanctions on Russia has made an impact. The Russian ruble has plunged hard, and multinational companies are exiting Russia. As of 6th day of this conflict, Russian attacks are getting more and more aggressive.
Швидка забрала?
Ебать, опять сейчас!
Це Бородянка. Вулиця. Яка вулиця це? Це виїзд якраз в круг. Ресторан Саша. Ресторан Саша, да, виїзд в сторону Києва. Вот как прилетело. Нихуёво.
Vladimir Putin has also threatened a nuclear attack, and a 64-kilometer-long military convoy has been spotted, moving towards Kyiv. It looks like Putin is in for a long haul. The Ukrainian president appealed European Union to accept Ukraine's EU membership.
We asked the European Union to admit Ukraine immediately, according to the new special procedure. We are grateful to the partners who stand with us, but our goal is to be with all Europeans and, most importantly, to be equal. I'm sure that's fair. I am sure we deserve it. I am sure it is possible.
Hello?
Good morning, Mr. Koloborodka. Can I connect you with Angela Merkel?
Yes, you can connect.
Hello, my congratulations. We decided to take your country to the European Union.
Oh, fuck! Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wow! Oh, you know, I'm so happy. Yes. Thank you very much. All the Ukrainians and all of our country, we've been waiting for this so much time.
Ukrainians?
Yes, Ukrainians.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's a mistake. I was calling to Montenegro.
Montenegro. Nice. Okay. Yeah, my congratulations. Yes, to Montenegro. Bye-bye.
By 2014, all of Putin's attempt to convince Ukraine back into his orbit failed. So in a last-ditch effort to control the country, Putin threatened Ukraine by taking over Crimean Peninsula and starting a separatist movement in Luhansk and Donetsk. However, the annexation of Crimea had the exact opposite effect of what Putin had intended. You remember in the first part of the video I mentioned a threat from Russia will force Ukraine towards the west. After the annexation of Crimea, exactly that happened. Since 2014, there has been a growing distaste for Russian interference among Ukrainians, best reflected in the 2019 presidential elections, in which the Ukrainian people elected the most pro-West president till date, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. In May 2019, Zelenskyy got elected, and by next year he was asking for a plan to expand NATO membership. That must have hurt Putin really bad. In June of 2021, Putin met Biden in Geneva and talked about the possibility of Ukraine becoming a NATO member.
Have you discussed the Ukrainian topic and possible Ukraine accession to NATO? As for possible Ukraine accession to NATO, well, we just touched upon this broadly, and there's nothing to discuss here.
Safe to say, he did not get a favorable response. At this moment, Putin must have felt completely cornered. All of his efforts over the years to control Ukraine had failed. None of his propaganda, political manipulation, and even insurgency managed to bring back Ukraine on Russia's side. It was during this time Vladimir Putin must have made up his mind to attack Ukraine and bring it under direct Russian control. As the year passed, things naturally began to fall in place in favor of Putin's plan. COVID-19 made major Western economies weaker than before. An increase in oil prices and high demand for Russian gas from Europe filled up Russia's foreign exchange reserves, crucial for survival once sanctions poured in after the invasion. Bahrain's disaster in Afghanistan and weak leadership in major NATO countries are factors that might have played favorably in Putin's head. I personally feel that the migrant crisis orchestrated at the Polish-Belarusian border in November last year was also done to gauge a response from European countries. A weak and kind of disunited response to the migrant crisis may have also encouraged Putin to move forward with his plan. In December 2021, while the Russian armed forces were getting ready for the invasion, Putin sent NATO and the United States one last offer to stop them from recruiting Ukraine and former Soviet states. After which he began the invasion of Ukraine, starting by conducting cyber strikes on Ukraine's critical infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is once again changing, from a unipolar one with US in charge to a bipolar world with China rising. And this moment is a transition phase, with no one in charge and anarchy at its peak. In this context, I will talk about the current Indian foreign policy in my next video. Thank you everyone for coming over to my vlog. I will see you soon.